Hello and welcome everyone to the 2023 Oregon Plastic Pollution Legislative Roundup. My name is Charlie Plybon and I'm the Oregon Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation. I'm really excited to host this event and to help kick off our shared plastic pollution efforts for the 2023 legislature. I'd like to first start off by thanking all the groups that have joined together to help put on this event. All these groups work on plastic pollution in the field in their own way, whether organizing volunteers for beach cleanups, river cleanups, roadside cleanups, working on ocean advocacy, door-to-door outreach, municipal waste management, even environmental health advocacy. It's really cool what all these groups are doing out in the field and across Oregon and really the nation to support a cleaner, plastic-free environment. These groups have forged a zero waste coalition over the past year to help advance the policy work in sale, and that's what you're going to be learning about today. We'll hear from a few of these groups to frame the overall issue of plastic pollution in Oregon, and then we'll dive into sort of each bill that we're introducing. We're going to move quickly through these presentations to help save time and to create some to help kick this off, I want to introduce Senator Janeen Sollman. She's our legislative champion on plastic pollution issues. Senator and I have had the opportunity to work together when she was in the House on the plastic bag ban and on a lot of other plastic pollution issues. And now I'm really proud that she's our chief sponsor for all the bills that you're going to be learning about today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Senator Janeen Sollman, District 15.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It is fantastic to be here. Thank you for inviting me to today's event. As Charlie said, I'm Janeen Sollman. I'm the state senator for Senate District 15, which includes areas of Forest Grove, Cornelius, Hillsborough, and the Rock Creek unincorporated Washington County area. I am thrilled to be here with you today to support zero waste policies. The 2023 legislative session began yesterday, and we are gearing up and ready to go. I also come to you as the new chair of the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, which held its first meeting yesterday. And we have a new feature in this committee that we debuted yesterday. It was something I borrowed from another committee, Senator Sarah Gelser-Bluen, and brought in youth voices. And so we want to hear from students on how our energy and environment decisions impact their lives or lack thereof of our decisions. Much of the work that I do has around environmental policy actually has included students and youth and their advocacy. So whether working on plastic bag ban or the straw bill, our youth are watching our actions related to their future, and especially around protection of our planet. So last year, I received over might have been the year before. I received over 500 letters from elementary school students asking me to ban polystyrene. Their perspective is so incredibly important because it's their future, and we are here to protect that future, and their voice must be heard. So solutions to plastic pollution may take multiple approaches and strategies. As a Metro Master Recycler, I know the importance of reduce, reuse, recycle. We need to remember, however, that we have to be thoughtful about the entire life cycle of a product. And what the most important of the three is to reduce our consumption and the impacts of overproduction of plastics and harmful packaging that they have on our environment. So this session, I'm introducing multiple strategies under a zero waste initiative. There have been absolutely fantastic advocates that we have been working with on this policy, and that will go into more detail, but I just want to kind of provide you like a little brief overview. So first and foremost, to reduce, we want to eliminate harmful products like polystyrene, which is problematic in all life stages of the product raising of like waste and economic and health and social issues. So Senate Bill 543 would ban polystyrene foodware, coolers, and those crazy little packing peanuts, as well as phase out PFAS. It's a toxic forever chemical from food packaging. It is actually linked to thyroid and kidney and ovarian cancer. Nasty stuff. Needs to be removed from our foodware packaging. So second is to reuse. We want to enable consumers and businesses to the better the opportunity to reuse and repair. So I have a couple of policies to better enable reuse, like Senate Bill 542. It's the right to repair bill. This bill will allow people to have the right to repair their own consumer electronic products and gain access to the parts, to the tools and the instructions that they need to do so. This is going to save laptops, it's going to save phones and other small electronic devices that are currently too expensive or actually very burdensome to repair from going into the landfill. And it actually give and add years to the life of those products. So lastly, I want to talk about how we need to set clear reduction targets. So we know that we're actually moving the needle on the issue. Senate Bill 544 requires producers to reduce the amount of single-use plastic packaging and foodware by 25% over the next decade. So if you're catching my drift on all of this and what I've had to say today, it's about plastic, and we are being buried in it. It's in our waterways, it's in our soil. We are then consuming that, and it is in our belly. So microplastics are harmful to our bodies, and we're only recycling 9% of the plastic that we actually create. So I am so encouraged to see all of you here today. You're ready to engage in these issues. Please reach out to your legislators and ask them to support these bill concepts. The advocates here today can share the details of how to do that and how to find your legislator. But I sincerely appreciate your passion in this space. As you can tell, I share it too. And I look forward to continuing to do the work alongside all of you to protecting our planet. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Senator. I encourage you folks to put your Q&A in the Q&A feature. Senator Sollman has to move on to some other legislative affairs this afternoon. But thank you very much. That was really great, and it was a great introduction to all the issues that we're going to be talking about in more detail. So we're going to move along to our first speaker here. Tara Brock is Pacific Counsel to the Oceana. Works on a number of different issues. Oceana is really remarkable work around fisheries along our coast, does a lot of work on plastic pollution as well, and sort of is steeped in that area from the beach outward into the ocean, which is an important part of Oregon. So she's going to frame the issue here for us a little bit before we dive into each bill, and welcome, Tara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. As Charlie said, I work everyone feel good at the start here, and to talk a little bit about how we really are a blue planet. At Oceana, we always have to highlight that piece. And oceans cover more than 70% of our Earth's surface and are really critical to life on Earth. They provide more than 50% of the oxygen on our planet. And despite this, our oceans are really choking on plastics. They're being inundated by a material that does not biodegrade, builds up on our environment, and threatens marine animals and our human health and our food chain. So I always like to show the pretty picture before showing other more disturbing pictures. So Charlie, next slide, please. So an estimated 900 marine species, including many endangered species, are affected by marine plastic pollution, really through entanglement and ingestion, as you can see pictured here. Even zooplankton, which are the tiny marine organisms that form the base of our ocean food chain, are eating plastic. And that can bioaccumulate up the food chain into larger predators and into the fish that we eat. Often we see entanglement like pictured here with a harbor seal. This was actually taken on an Oregon beach that had a packing strap really tightly entangled around her neck. But we also, one of the more common ways that plastics is affecting marine species is through ingestion. And albatross really became the poster children of plastic pollution when it started to be documented that they were going out they live really far out at sea, and they were bringing back pieces of plastic that they mistook for food and feeding it to their chicks, who are then starving from having their bellies full of this indigestible plastic material. Next slide. So when plastic first entered the mass market in the 1950s, it was really celebrated. It made life more convenient. It was efficient. For those that have seen Mad Men, there's a scene where they have a family picnic and afterwards they shake off the blanket of all of their disposable materials and just let them fly away without having to do any dishes. So it was really a celebrated thing when we got disposable plastics. Today, nearly 40% of all plastic produced is for packaging. It's a sector that expanded rapidly as we moved from reusable, where we used to have the milkman and other reusable items, to single-use containers. And unsurprisingly, that's really what we see on our beaches as well. And so one of the top 10 items collected on beach cleanups, single-use plastics are the most common. And this is anything from food wrappers to beverage bottles, grocery bags, takeout containers, straws. And this data bears out in Oregon as well. Data from Oregon Surfrider and Solve cleanups show that these single-use foodware and packaging are among the top 5 items collected. Next slide. Unfortunately, most of the plastic in the ocean is made of pieces too small to just be picked up at a beach cleanup, as you can see pictured here. Both of these photos were taken on Oregon beaches. This microplastic contamination is really difficult to count and to quantify, but one study estimated that up to 51 trillion microplastic particles were present on the ocean surface in 2014. And we know that microplastics aren't just on the surface, they permeate through all the ocean water column. And so when plastics enter the ocean, they really break down, but they don't go away. And then they act as magnets for other pollutants. And Oregon is not immune to these impacts. These pictures were taken on Oregon beaches, and plastics have been found in Pacific oysters along our coast and in rockfish. And plastic pollution is not exclusively a coastal problem. In 2021, Environment Oregon did a survey of 30 waterways and found microfibers or microplastic particles in every single place they looked. This was all rivers from the Willamette to the Rogue to a Crater Lake, they found plastic particles. Next slide. So half of all the plastic, I think we might have skipped one slide, apologies. Half of all plastic in Earth's history was produced in just the last 19 years. We're now seeing plastic in our oceans, in the air, in our food, in our bodies, and most of it didn't exist before 2004. And as of 2015, the world is producing 400 million metric tons of plastic, and production is not slowing down. In fact, we're going faster than ever. And plastic production is projected to quadruple by 2050 from 2014 levels. And most of these plastics are made from fossil fuels, which contribute to climate change from extraction to production to their end of life. And if plastics were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. And in the US, that plastic is projected to outpace coal's greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So if we ever want to hit our climate goals, we really need to tackle plastic production. And it's also really important to note that plastic production has a disproportionate impact on low-income communities and communities of color due to the location of these production facilities in those communities, which pollute the air, the soil, and the water surrounding them. Next slide, please. So an estimated 15 million metric tons of plastic enter the marine environment each year. That's 33 billion pounds, which is equivalent to about 2 garbage trucks of plastic being dumped into the ocean every minute. And if we continue business as usual production and use of plastics, the amount of plastic entering the ocean is projected to triple by 2040. And in reality, we're really on pace to exceed those projections. Next slide. We're also learning more all the time about the human health impacts of plastics. Chemicals that are added to plastic are linked to cancer, immune suppression, obesity, diabetes, and a host of other hormone and reproductive effects. And because these chemical additives are not tightly bound to plastics, they can leach into our food and beverages from the plastic packaging. But we also need to be very mindful of the alternatives to plastic and what we're allowing to replace those single-use plastic items as we move away from plastic. And one chemical that has received a lot of attention in recent times is PFAS, which is often added to coating paper products as a grease barrier. So we see this often in French fry boxes or bakery bags and sandwich wrappers to make sure that that water and grease barrier is there to the paper product. However, we also have found that there are many paper products that do not contain PFAS. So the correct and good alternatives and healthy alternatives are out there. And PFAS, as you heard from Senator Sollman earlier, is linked to a whole host of health issues, but it's also highly persistent in the environment. And many PFAS are so persistent that they just accumulate, they never go away. So Washington State passed the first measure to restrict PFAS in paper food packaging in 2018, and several other states have looked at this issue as well. So we're very excited that Oregon's looking at it too. Next slide. And as I said, there is here, 17 local jurisdictions have taken action on plastics in Oregon. And the amount of countrywide plastic legislation has increased really rapidly in recent years. More than 90 countries have taken action on plastic bags, and a number are actually just eliminating single-use plastic products across the board, such as France is doing with single-use plastic foodware. Next slide. So the question we really need to ask ourselves is, what future do we want to see? We know that if we continue on our current course, that these impacts are only going to increase, and we're going to see worse effects of plastic pollution in Oregon's environment. And this isn't just about the amount we can reduce from today, but also preventing what we are on track to do in the future. The good news is that 8 in 10 voters support these policies, and governments are starting to act. And so you're about to hear a couple great policies that we have proposed here in Oregon. Senator Sollman gave us a little preview of those. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Charlie so we can hear more about what Oregon's looking to do.
Thanks so much, Tara. And just a reminder, if you have any questions on Tara's presentation or anything that Senator Sollman or other presenters raised, please do use the Q&A feature. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. It's the State Director for Environment Oregon, Celeste Meiffren-Swango.
Thanks, Charlie, and thank you so much, Tara, for that presentation. I am Celeste Meiffren-Swango. I'm the State Director with Environment Oregon. We are a statewide member-based environmental advocacy organization working for clean air, clean water, open space, and a livable climate. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about Senate Bill 543, Foam-Free Oregon. So one of the most egregious single-use plastics is polystyrene foam, which is more commonly known as styrofoam. And it's a type of plastic that's typically not reused. It's not accepted in curbside recycling, and it's one of the top items found polluting Oregon's beaches, as you can see in this picture that Charlie took. And styrene, the major building block of polystyrene, that's considered probably carcinogenic by the World Health Organization, has been found to leach out of polystyrene containers at all temperatures, posing a threat to human health. So Senate Bill 543 would ban polystyrene foam foodware, coolers, and packing peanuts across the state. And I say this a lot, but when I was a kid, I learned about how bad styrofoam is for the environment. I'm sure a lot of you did too. And yet here we are decades later still using this stuff. I mean, we simply don't need it, and it's time for it to go. The city of Portland has had a ban on polystyrene foam foodware on the books for 30 years. And by our count, at least 8 other Oregon cities have since followed suit. Ashland, Eugene, Florence, Lincoln City, Medford, Milwaukee, Newport, and Silverton. Additionally, 9 states across the country have taken action to reduce polystyrene, and so we want to make Oregon the 10th state this year. So a version of this bill was introduced in the 2019 session and then again in 2021. But there's an old saying that in order to pass ambitious policy in Oregon, you have to introduce it 3 times. So we are hopeful that 2023 is our year. So this version of the bill is different from other versions in a couple of ways. So first is that we are attempting to figure out a way to address the issue with alternatives. So the concern is that if we ban polystyrene foam, it'll just be replaced with something that's potentially just as harmful, like rigid plastic. And we certainly don't want to see this environmentally harmful plastic simply replaced with another environmentally harmful plastic. And so we're still figuring out exactly how to do that in a way that makes sense and is feasible. And we're close, we're not quite there yet, so stay tuned. And then second, this version of the bill includes packing peanuts. So Washington passed a foam ban back in 2021, and theirs includes packing peanuts, and we were super jealous and want to do that here too. So we included that in this bill. And then third, this bill includes phasing out PFAS, which, as Tara mentioned, is a toxic forever chemical that's linked to thyroid, kidney, and ovarian cancers from food packaging. And again, Washington and a couple of other states have passed similar bills, so Oregon would not be the first. At the end of the day, when nothing we use for just a few minutes should be polluting our environment for hundreds of years. And I look forward to working with all of you alongside Senator Sollman and this amazing coalition to get Senate Bill 543 across the finish line this year. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Celeste. We'll move along then, and we'll go back to Tara, who's going to talk to us a little bit about reduction.
Thanks, Charlie. I think Senator Sollman really did a great job of talking about how we first have to start with reducing the use of plastics and the production of plastics. And luckily, we have some great proposals this year to do just that. And recycling alone is just really not enough to solve the plastics crisis. Even though some great policies have been put in place over the last few years to help increase recycling, it's just never going to keep pace with the projected rate of plastic production and use. We often say that recycling is like trying to mop up water from an overflowing bathtub while the faucet is still running. And we really need to turn off the tap at the source and stop plastic pollution at the source. Next slide. So the real solution has to be reduction. And last year, in the summer of 2022, California passed the strongest source reduction policy in the nation, which would actually require significant reduction of plastics and no more increases in the use of single-use plastic packaging and foodware, and would also implement the nation's first reuse and refill mandates. And we're really excited, as Senator Sollman talked a little bit about having our own version of that policy here in Oregon. And so SB 544 would place 3 really important mandates on producers of single-use plastic packaging and foodware to really target the reduction that we need. It would require a 25% reduction of the total weight and number of plastic packages and foodware coming into the state by 2030. With interim measures along the way to make sure that we're hitting targets and that we don't get to 2030 and we haven't done anything yet. And then 10% of that 10% must be achieved through reuse and refill products and packaging, or through eliminating the product altogether, which is really important because we don't just want to eliminate and replace only with other materials, but being able to make sure we also put those systems in place for reuse and refill to really flourish. And the last thing that the bill requires is that it requires the Environmental Quality Commission, to determine whether packaging and foodware is necessary, and then to prohibit or limit foodware packaging it determines is not necessary for the delivery of the package or foodware. So we're really excited about SB 544 and its ability to help Oregon turn off the tap. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, Tara, and I will turn it back over to myself now to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 545, legalizing reusables. During the pandemic, we learned that a lot of the reuse that we promote as part of the plastic pollution solution, it wasn't actually legal in Oregon. So both in the retail and in the restaurant space, we learned that in bulk and in produce, reusable containers just weren't really allowed, and there were some enforcement actions that were coming down the woodwork. Now, wait a second, you might say that's nonsense. I go to my co-op and I refill my mason jars all the time. That may be true, but it may not be legal. The problem was there's a lot of inconsistent enforcement of that code. And so when enforcement started happening during the pandemic, it caught a lot of groups off guard, particularly some small businesses, grocers, and co-ops that for years have been offering this service to help reduce their plastic pollution and promote zero waste to their customers. So I'm one of those customers, and you may be one of those customers too that has been unimpacted by this, but many were during the pandemic, and really getting the policy straight is an important part of leading a reuse culture. So Senate Bill 545 addresses two different codes. Retail code is addressed by the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and restaurant code is addressed by Oregon Health Authority. They sort of operate under a very similar code framework, but two separate agencies that regulate those. We started working on this issue back during the pandemic, and so we've been successful working with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. They do have some draft rules and some rulemaking that's underway right now. So we may only need about half of this bill. So we're going to be probably reworking this depending on what those rules look like that come out of Oregon Department of Agriculture this year. But again, this is an important part of us promoting that reuse culture, enabling consumers and businesses to reduce their waste. And as we learned when working on this issue, it was a much greater issue than just sort of reducing plastic pollution. For a lot of people, it was about availability of food and the types of food that they wanted to promote or bring into their household. And food access was a real issue that sort of started popping up as we worked on this one. So we're excited to kind of move this policy forward. We're excited to see some of the progress that's been made by our agencies, but we think that this bill will ensure that both agencies carry this forward and help reduce our plastic pollution consumerism needs in Oregon. So I'm going to pass it along now to our next speaker, who's going to talk about reuse as well, but more about repair and reuse, which is a huge part of our electronics industry. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Charlie Fisher, who's the state director for OSPIRG. So Charlie.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. Again, I'm Charlie Fisher. I run OSPIRG. We're a statewide member-funded public interest organization with thousands of members around Oregon. And yeah, I'm going to talk about right to repair, which isn't exactly plastics, but is very much zero waste, and excited to be here. So right to repair is really simple at its core. It's about making it easier for you to fix your stuff. And as Senator Sollman said at the beginning here, the stuff that we're talking about in this context is consumer electronics and appliances. So phones, tablets, and computers, as well as dishwashers, washing machines, pretty much anything in your home that has a computer chip. So obviously a lot of older appliances don't have that, but newer ones do. And so we're making sure that those are covered as well. So, I think we all know that there are quite a lot of consequences of our current disposable throwaway culture, especially when it comes to products that sometimes cost over $1,000 that have global supply chains and often toxic materials in their production. And so, just a couple real world consequences of this for disposable electronics. The first, obviously, is electronic waste, which is the fastest growing waste stream in the world right now. And we estimate that Oregonians discard about 4,800 phones each day. Manufacturing new electronics also requires a huge amount of energy and raw materials. So 85% of the energy and climate impact associated with a smartphone, for example, comes from manufacturing. And it's estimated that 295 pounds of raw material go into a single iPhone. So, reusing these products or extending their life can have a really big impact on the waste stream, on climate, and a whole host of other things. And the reality is that companies are increasingly intentionally making it difficult to fix their products because their business model is built on you buying a new phone or other device every couple of years. And this graphic is from a survey that we did talking to businesses that do repair regularly, and highlighting some of the examples of pretty outrageous practices for manufacturers. So for example, the schematics that would maybe tell someone how to do a simple fix on a phone simply aren't available, meaning that either you have to figure it out on your own or find someone online on YouTube who has figured it out, or just give up and buy a new device. Parts themselves or the software necessary to pair a part and a device are also difficult, if not impossible to come by. So for example, if you take a camera out of the new iPhone and you put it into an identical iPhone, the camera wouldn't work because Apple requires special calibration software that they don't make available to the public. So parts, tools, both physical and software, and repair manuals, that's what we need to repair to fix our stuff. That's what we need to be able to fix our stuff. And that's what Right to Repair does. It requires companies to make available those parts, tools, and repair manuals and schematics to consumers, as well as to independent repair professionals. So think about kind of your ability to take your car to the dealership or to the independent mechanic down the road. That's what we want for electronics. So Senator Sollman introduced a bill, Senate Bill 542, that would do just that. And we have a lot of momentum at our back. Late last year, New York became the first state in the country to pass an electronics right to repair bill, which passed nearly unanimously, so very bipartisan. And we expect dozens more states to introduce bills this year. Finally, our coalition is strong and growing. It includes many on this call, but also groups that work on consumer issues.
We're going to move on to our next speaker. Actually, no, we're not moving to our next speaker. We're going to questions now. So I will ask all our panelists to come back. Excellent. And thank you all for your presentations. I'm going to go through each of these questions. Some of them I think have been answered already. So just the ones that we're still waiting on an answer for. I'll start with, does Senate Bill 544 include EPR language? Who wants to field that?
I can. So in 2021, the Oregon legislature passed the Recycling Modernization Act, which includes a shared responsibility model for producers of packaging and paper products. And we did attempt to include the 25% source reduction as part of that effort, but we're unsuccessful. And so I think given that California passed the 25% source reduction, as Tara mentioned, and because we think source reduction is a really key part of making sure we're getting these harmful single-use plastics out of the waste stream, we're introducing it as a kind of a standalone policy this session.
Thanks, Celeste. I'm going to jump into one of these questions here from Hannah. What does producers mean in Senate Bill 544? Are they the food manufacturers filling the containers or the original manufacturers of the single-use containers? I see Tara is trying to type an answer to that question.
Yeah, I was apologies.
I
I was typing an answer, but I can answer live. So producer is kind of a multi-pronged definition under the bill. It includes, so it could be either, to answer your question specifically, it could be the manufacturer of the item or the owner of the trademark or brand that is selling the items. So in case of like a a yogurt container, it could be the company that actually owns the trademark of that, and they're buying, they are probably in contract with someone who manufactures that item. Or if neither of those are met, it could also be the person that is importing that item into the state. So it really is going to depend on the situation and would be something that would have to be identified for each of those products and packages.
Thanks, Tara. Next question, will these repairs be cheaper than replacing the products? I think that's referring to you, Charlie.
Sure, I can answer that. Thanks for the question. So yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I'll just give a quick fact. We estimate that the average household spends about $1,500 annually purchasing new electronic products, and estimate that those households could save about $330 per year by repairing their electronics. So there's definitely savings to be had there. And then if you just think about the fact that there are going to be more options for repair, the companies now, they won't have a monopoly essentially on repair. They can charge as much as they want. And essentially that means they get you to buy new. So if we can get an ecosystem of small business repair professionals around the state who are competing with that, then we'll have cheaper repairs, we'll have better repairs, and we'll have less waste.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to Debbie's questions. Can we hear more about ideas for alternatives to polystyrene and PFAS? This is a tough question, but a good one that we ought to talk about. Celeste, do you want to jump into that, or Tara?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So right now, again, like I said, I think the thing we want to avoid is replacing polystyrene with rigid plastic or other kind of harmful single-use plastic containers. And so we're thinking of, wanting to have takeout containers in particular that are fiber-based, that can actually decompose, compostable, or recyclable in the state of Oregon. But at the end of the day, I think where we want to be headed longer term is to be shifting away from single-use products as much as possible and shift, which is why I think, Senate Bill 545 is so important, which is the bill that Charlie talked about, in making sure that the state of Oregon is really ready to create reusable and refillable systems. So in general. If you have anything else to add.
One of the things that I'll put out there that makes this challenging and uniquely challenging for the state of Oregon is that Oregon does not embrace the idea of compostable plastics and high heat compost facilities like they have in Washington and California. They've embraced this, which makes an alternative easier. Make it that there's an alternative that people can throw away or quote unquote compost. For a number of reasons, that's a challenge in Oregon. We don't have those types of facilities. There's generally high confusion amongst consumers. Maybe you've received compost before that had plastic in it. I certainly haven't gotten a load in years that didn't have plastic in it. So this is one of the challenges in really trying to operate in waste management, a space that creates a single-use alternative that is okay and disposable or is recyclable is kind of the direction that we try and look to. Again, enabling reuse is a big part of this too, and shifting our culture other reusable systems. But that's the big challenge, I think, in legislating and working on this policy in Oregon. And I don't know if Tara or Celeste would have anything else to add to that. Sounds like maybe no. Okay, let's go to the next question. Let's see. When people get takeout in hard plastic containers, example from Thai Place, they still treat it as single-use item. Get the food out and then throw it out, not reuse or recycle it. So in a sense, it's worse since there are more usables to go through into this. There needs to be consumer incentives from businesses to bring back and reuse. That's a great comment. Celeste or Tara, do you guys want to talk about some of the things that we've done in the past to try and address and create those incentives One of the challenges is those consumer incentives often look like punishment to businesses. And so that's the big challenge is we've looked at like takeout to go fees and other things that would incentivize bringing back containers. And some businesses have really embraced this. A good example would be GoBox, which is now not GoBox. I'm sorry, what's the name of GoBox now, Celeste or Tara? I apologize to the business if you're on right now listening to this, but I think folks are aware of the takeout reusable program that's been embraced in Portland, particularly around food markets. And so I think that's one is creating small business in those spaces. But again, like I mentioned before in our policy, this is a challenge and it's something that we do have to work on and embrace as a challenge as we work through this.
Bold reuse.
Bold reuse. I love it. All right. So next question. Is there funding in this to help build the alternative systems? Reusable packaging washing systems are expensive and require special washing systems beyond regular dishwasher. So I think maybe that's asking about the legalizing reuse bill. And the short answer is no. There's no funding in that, primarily because this isn't a mandate that requires businesses to do this. It's certainly, it's just opening up the code to allow businesses that want to allow individuals to bring their own containers. So some businesses have footed these expenses and they want to embrace zero waste culture and they may incorporate that into the cost of business. And so we want to make it legal for them to be able to do that. But this doesn't mandate any of these things. In the case of mandating, we would certainly want to have a funding package to support those washing systems, and particularly other reuse ideas. So I think maybe we have time for one more question. This is a good one just because it's a big overall question. Can you remind us of this legislative session's time frame? When are the key dates for these Senate bills? And I think Celeste would be a fantastic person to answer that question.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Thanks for the question. So the Oregon legislative session started yesterday. And I think at least for a couple of the bills that we're working on, the bill language is out and it's public and you can see it on the Oregon legislative website, and we can put links to them in the chat for folks to go read. But I think we are going to be proposing some changes to what is there. And so over the next couple of weeks, we'll be figuring out how we want the bills to look. And then we're hoping that, you know, in February, that we'll get hearings on these bills, and we'll be sure to email out key dates to folks once we have a better, yes, as Bree says, we'll send links to all the bills, and then we'll also make sure that you're all aware of hearing dates and times for these bills moving forward. But I guess the short version of that is we don't know yet.
So I think that's it we have for questions. I do want to just highlight some take action opportunities here. And I want to bring back on Julia Bonheim, our Rise Above Plastics campaign lead with our Portland chapter. And Julia, do you want to hop on and give us some next steps for taking action and how people can get involved right now?
Yeah, so the plastic pollution problem feels overwhelming and disturbing if you're like me. And so luckily we have some pretty easy actions for you to take in order to share your views with other Oregonians and legislators. And we will send them all out in an email, but we'll also put some in the chat right now. The first one is an Environment Oregon action letter, which is pretty general. It's just telling your legislators that you really want them to focus on plastic pollution. The next one is fun. There's a website where you can find your legislator and see who's really representing you. And to do this, you just plug in the website and then your address, and you'll know which names to refer to when you send out this Instagram post, which says, I care about Oregon's plastic pollution problem and I'll support the laws to change it. And so the idea there is that you'll post that. We have some suggested language that you could add to that. It says, there are so many ways to reduce plastic pollution this year. We can legalize reusables, place a ban on foam and foodware, increase the right to repair, and make certain that producers engage in source reduction. I live in, and then you put your city, and I hope that Oregon legislators tackles plastic pollution this session by voting yes on SB 543, SB 544, SB 542, and SB 545, and then you tag your legislator. And so, yeah, we'd like to just see this shared far and wide. Back to you, Charlie.
Thanks so much, Julia, and thanks to all of our panelists, thanks to our sponsors and individuals, and thank you to Senator Sollman and everybody for joining and your great questions. If you take a look at the chat, my colleague Bree Goodwin, who's responsible for a lot of the organizing of this event, has posted some great links in there so you can follow up on those actions that you just heard from Julia. And we encourage you guys, in your own way to figure out how to be creative and get involved in these issues. There'll be lots of opportunities throughout the legislative session. We will follow up with you with all these different links so that you get an email. We apologize for any questions we didn't get to. We wanted to keep this short and make sure everybody had time for lunch and to get back on with their day. So thank you all for participating. Thank you all for your time. And with that, we will conclude our event. Thanks so much.